It's a Monday, you guys.
It is.
One of the Mondays of all time.
December 4th.
This happens on early days in December. This card has come up multiple times, this one card.
4 years ago?
Yeah, the last time this card came back, I was trying to get home from a trip so I could buy list 8 copies of this particular card before it was banned.
Well, now you've got it now. It's 4 years hold. Hodl.
I buy Magic cards the way that Andrea Mangucci taught me, which is buy high and never sell. And that's,
I mean, I'll be honest, it probably worked out for you in this case because I checked on TCG earlier and I think they were already at $25. So
yeah, surprise!
What?
It happened instantaneously.
Am I ever going to use this card? Am I ever going to use Splinter Twin? Why is Splinter Twin $25 again? You guys? Hello and welcome to episode 252 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, strategies, and bans for the casual spike. My name is Shane, here in Denver, Colorado. With me on the line from Massachusetts, it's the one and only Devin O'Donnell, aka Doomwake. You streamed all day, right? We had to cut you off.
Well, I was telling Dave earlier, what happened was they made the announcement at 11 a.m. my time, but the actual bans didn't go into effect on Magic Online until 3 p.m. Eastern my time.
Oh, no.
So I had to we kind of just chilled on stream for a little bit, built a bunch of Copter decks, and then I was like, I'm just going to take a break and then come back at 3. So it was good, though.
Well, I'm sure we will talk about those. It's a wild world of Pioneer for you to explore. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Dave didn't interrupt me this time, so also with us, it's a Godfather Dave Harbacher.
I'm just so off of my game from today that I had a long day at work, like a good long day at work. But I was in my office on a Monday for the first time ever.
I had a bad long day.
Yeah, I had a long meeting that at the end of the day that was an hour and a half long, and then I had to run out, and then I realized I hadn't done any notes. I hadn't read the B&R announcement. I had just I knew what had happened, but it was a ponderous drive home. But I did figure out what I am really going to do with part of my New Year's resolution also ask for Christmas, which is I am going to finally get my Hall of Shame of cards that I have that are banned so that I can hang them on the wall and turn them into art instead of having them just in boxes still. So
how about banned cards that you never cast in real life?
I do have a few of those. I don't have many, but I do have a few. One of them was today.
Oh, we'll talk more about that. I have some banned cards that I got in Russian that were banned in routes.
Yeah, that's always fun.
Yeah, those are old. Those are from back in the day. I think they're the Once Upon a Times.
Oh, right. Russian Once Upon a Time for Tron.
I still have a couple of packages that haven't come in yet for the Geological Appraiser deck. So
no.
Oh, man. Well,
move so they never get you. Then you can get a refund. It's worth it.
And for you to hold these unbanned cards, not the banned ones, I mean, I guess you could hold them in these, but that would be a bad use of high-quality equipment. We've got Heavy Play, our now longtime sponsor. A new card gaming accessories brand improves your gameplay and your game day as you take your new experimental decks to your FNM, LGS, who knows, RCQ. Or RC of your choice. They have playmats, deck boxes, card sleeves, all featuring enhanced ergonomics, enhanced mobility, enhanced protection. I love the stuff. Heavy Play's unique EquipMag system allows you to ABC, attach, bundle, and carry all of your gaming gear in a single hand, slide it easily in and out of your backpack, game bag, whatever the heck you want to use. You can get these perhaps at your LGS or shop now at heavyplay.com. You can use code the Dive Down 2023 for 10% off of your first order there. The Dive Down 2023.
Shane, I have to ask, please keep it down. My child is asleep.
Oh my God. What is going on?
It's 3 a.m. there?
4.
2 a.m.?
2.
Who can sleep on a day like this?
You're like a kid on Christmas. You were like, I remember in the Discord today, you were like, my heart's kind of pounding.
And you know what else I did in the Discord today? Tried to get Dave to commit to giving me one Smuggler's Copter. He won't do it. He won't commit.
He won't. I've noticed that. I noticed he did not confirm.
Next time I see you, buddy, I'm going to
The
give you a
looter
nice
scooter.
firm handshake, and here you go.
Bring it to Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm going to see him. Stan's going to be here a little bit before that for other stuff, so I will see him soon. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for holiday.
I don't want to commit OPSEC, but yeah.
I guess we should mention that at least Shane, Stan, Dave, we're trying to convince Doom we're all going to be in Chicago for the Magic Con 2023. So we will talk more about that when the time is coming close. But if this convinces you, if you're like, I've got to see these 3 Jokers, perhaps 4.
Yeah, and also this will be roughly like let's call it the 5-year anniversary of the dive down, kind of. It's a couple months after it. We're going to have some kind of party, and if you're nice to us, maybe we'll invite you.
We'll also be at the official after party at Chicago's classic House of Blues.
True.
Yes, we are at the official after party. We got tickets. I'm going to do some karaoke if I can get in the queue.
It's going to be a long queue. Magic players love karaoke.
They do.
They really do. I just checked flights again. They're only 150, so I'll have to think about it.
Don't think too hard. Just do.
We can help you. We can hook. We can make it easier for you. However you want to make it easy. You let us know. Whatever that means.
One thing I did want to mention real quick, we were talking about heavy play. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but Randy said wanted me to make sure to mention to all of our listeners that they're going to be in Atlanta. So if y'all are in Atlanta and you want to check out the heavy play stuff, definitely go give Randy, say hi to Randy.
Yeah, tell him we sent you. All right, so on this week's show, we're talking bans and an unban, I guess mostly bans. The December 4th B&R announcement has dropped. We are here to provide you with some takes. We will talk about the announcement itself, the impacts to Pioneer and Modern, and I guess our thoughts on things moving forward. Should be fun, should be take-filled. We've got Stanislav on the line, so it's going to be even better than I expected. So,
I mean, yeah, we got all 4 of us. Unbelievable. Look at that smile on Stan's face. I'm so excited. I'm excited to see you guys too, but I'm excited Stan surprised us with this. And what a day. Oh, good. Having some orange juice to keep it going tonight.
That's right.
Perfect.
I'm sure our editor is over the moon with having to deal with aligning 4 of us perfectly, but
it'll be fine.
He'll
this is
figure
what
it
we
out.
pay him for.
Exactly. All right. Where do we want to start? Are we going to read this thing?
Yes, we should start with housekeeping, probably, David.
Oh, housekeeping. Okay, I got you. Housekeeping. We're going to do this fast. No new patrons, no increased tiers. If you would like to support us, please check us out at patreon.com/thedivedown, where you're going to get swag, you're going to get Discord if you join our nation of lovely people who we talk to all the time. We did have some new reviews on Spotify specifically. It's still kind of popping off in the Spotify comments. William, Salvador S, Ferdy K, and Alan. And by the way, there were about 2,000 or 3,000 people who we were the number 1 podcast for on Spotify this year, I believe.
That's crazy.
And that is great. And thank you so much.
I didn't know we got those stats, Dave. That's impressive.
Yeah, we got the stats. It's something around that number. Yeah, I think it's around 2,000, which is really nice. And so, thanks so much for listening on Spotify. And if you got us as your number 1, let us know if you're one of those people who's in the top half percentile of fans or whatever for the dive down. We'd love to see it. Get us on Twitter with that. You can check out our store at thedivedown.com/store. Check it out. We'll be hopefully launching some new stuff next year. We're not doing it yet, but we're still looking at it. Mana Traders, you can check out Mana Traders. We love Mana Traders. You can rent new cards for this new world in Pioneer and Modern. Use code THEDiveDown23 to get 10% off your first 2 months of rentals with Mana Traders, manatraders.com. And then finally,
I will say, Dave, that code should be changing soon. So watch this space. If it doesn't work, then check our Twitter or the webpage. We'll have updated codes there.
And then Barrister Man, we will talk a little bit more about Barrister Man a little bit later in the show, but go check out Barrister Man. They have great new products that have launched for this holiday season. A gift for that person who is hard to shop for is perfect from Barrister and Man. The Dive Down 23. Those numerals are spelled out, and this particular code now gets you. What does it get you, Shane? I forget. 15% off your first order.
That sounds right.
All right. Will, thank you so much for your support all this time. And now we will get into the meat of the show, which is going to be absolute chaos because this was announced less than 12 hours ago, and we have day jobs, and Devin was working on stream. And so we don't have a lot of notes. It's not going to be structured, but let's see where it goes.
Figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, pull up this page with me, y'all. Mm-hmm. I've got the B&R announcement, and we'll get the cool stuff out of the way and then get into some details. Pioneer, Karn the Great Creator is banned. Geological Appraiser is banned. Smuggler's Copter is unbanned. And then in Modern, Fury is banned. Up the Beanstalk is banned. Full stop. The end.
Wow.
Is it the
so
end?
I had the over-under for net cards in this announcement at 2 because I strongly thought there was going to be a Modern unban. There was not a Modern unban. So, we got 2 bans in Pioneer, 1 unban, 2 bans in Modern.
Yeah. Before we get into the announcement details, I don't know if you all spent time actually reading this or anything like that. I just wanted to go on the record saying I thought this was a good announcement. I thought it was pretty thorough, pretty well reasoned. I don't think it surprised anybody. I think this is kind of if you asked for the 5 cards people thought were going to have some kind of change, I think these are the 5 people would list. This is kind of exactly what I saw people referring to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think this is what people thought 6 weeks ago.
No,
but it is what we thought for the last week because they all but told us that it's going to be these 5 cards.
Yeah, that is true.
Did they tell Smuggler's Copter though?
No, I don't think so.
I think that's a surprise, personally.
Well, so they did insinuate that they're willing and considering an unbanned Pioneer, and I think most people connected the dots that Copter was the only one that seemed like it wouldn't be a disaster out the gate, or it wouldn't be a combo piece, basically.
That makes sense. Wouldn't be a combo piece, the key part there, right?
I mean, we'll talk more about this later, but I think Smuggler's Copter being unbanned was one of the first things I saw people mention. It seemed like one of those things hey, this happened a long time ago. It's potentially safe unban. It's potentially fun unban. So let's see what happens type thing. So, I'm personally not too surprised, but
yeah, I think for the most part, these changes are again, that's pretty much what I expected. I kind of figured Karn and Geological, I think those were kind of the obvious bans in Pioneer. Fury and Beanstalk, they did mention those cards. I mean, if a lot of people in my chat had asked me what card could be unbanned in Pioneer, and I would say, I mean, if you look at the list, it's probably Smuggler's Copter, but I never thought they would pull the trigger. And, I'm very pleasantly surprised to see that they did.
Yeah, and we'll get into these kind of details later. I think the most interesting thing to me was how much Dave's just showing what he's got with
Dave's rich.
5+ Smuggler's Copters.
That's $700 right there.
Exactly.
They didn't focus on concrete statistics like win rate or play rate or even the undefinable fun factor type things. What I think they really focused on in this announcement were options. They focused on removing cards that were in their eyes suppressing a diverse or interesting metagame. And we'll get into all what options this perhaps was suppressing as we get into this announcement itself. But I think overall, I'm pretty happy if this is the general model of announcement that we should expect going forward. Me personally, I'm a data person. I would like more reference to some hard data, but maybe they've realized that's not the story that they want to or need to be telling to the public here. I don't know if any of you all have any thoughts about the announcement overall itself, the tone.
It actually kind of felt a little short to me, but I guess this means that people would actually read it. So I don't know what I was looking for that was more than this, but yeah, there weren't any stats, but that's fine. I think they explained what they were doing really well. These cards, it makes a lot of sense why they would be banned. I don't think the arguments are very long for what they're doing. Obviously, once we get into the formats individually, there might be some other things that we talk about other paths they could have taken, but this seemed like what was going to happen, and it's what happened.
All right. One of the first boring things we'll talk about, but it does have implications for, I think, how we want to think about these type of announcements going forward, is they were a little bit more concrete about the ban cadence and what their previous announcement meant and how they were thinking about this going forward. And they really said they were operating with a slightly more flexible announcement cadence. And really what that means is that Geological Appraiser, Devin's holding pennies while Dave's holding Benjamins. So these announcements are going to occur 2 to 5 weeks after each set's release. And what they were saying is that this allows them to capture more data from larger events, so like Pro Tours, ensuring that the changes are made before the next set begins previewing, that's very funny because previews happen so early now. So they really just said, we want to establish a clear picture of each format before you start evaluating and quote-unquote collecting cards from the next set. Yes, I only collect cards. I do not purchase cards. I never buy. I only collect.
That's why they call you Trade Binder Shane. Everywhere you go, it's building on your
I was
collection.
going to say, I just tape them directly into a binder next to each other. Like I put them in, I even use those photo sheets, just like stick it right down. It's fine.
Perfect. So there's a window following each main set release, and changes to basically everything but standard can happen during any of these windows. And they said that the next such window in 2024 is around March 11th, following the release of Murders at Karlov Manor. So basically, hoping to get some good data. They're going to look at larger tournaments, I imagine. They're going to hope to have some kind of event that they can get some decent data on versus just like things like leagues, I suppose.
I mean, in this case, they're going to have MagicCon Chicago a couple of weeks before that. So there will be plenty of data from the various events that happen at that, whether it's, plenty of high profile data for sure. I do want to say real quick, I think personally, lots of people have lots of opinions about when there should be ban windows, when there should be announcements of bans. They've tried lots of different strategies at WotC. I think that tying it to set releases is the thing that makes the most sense to me personally, because the set releases are the only dates on the calendar that don't really move around. And you know what they are months and months in advance. So regardless of whether something's going to happen or not, we have things happen where people are like, well, why couldn't they wait till after my tournament to announce this thing? Why couldn't they wait till after the RC in Atlanta to announce this? And I think if they are going to be fair or clear about their communication, number one, Magic's not just about gaming that happens in North America, right? Like there's different people who have different cultures who have different times when they might play a Magic tournament that matters a lot. But also tournaments come and go and different series get different importance over time. And Wizards can't really always anticipate what's going to be important to people in the competitive scene. But so I think that tying it to when they're actually releasing the product makes the most sense to me personally. And I feel really bad for people who were planning on playing Geological in Atlanta, Devin. But the, I don't know what other answer there is that's really good and fair. And certainly we did the thing where they didn't tell anybody when a ban was coming for a long time. And that was just like constant chaos. So I would much rather have this sort of every quarter we have to go, okay, are we going to have a ban this time? Are we not going to have a ban this time? What do we have? I think that's much better than just never knowing what's going to happen and having to hear about it constantly, personally.
I think the biggest issue with this specific tournament too, like if you want to, target Atlanta, the issue was that because of the DreamHack schedule, they had to like move the RC to not line up with the rest of the RCs. Like, you'll notice the very first RC was in September, which was 3 months ago. And 3 months later, we're still in the same RC season. So if we had, the tournaments spaced out the way that they should have been, then we probably wouldn't be having this conversation because there wouldn't be a ban list right before the last RC,
Right. We'd still be talking about it, but we wouldn't be having the feeling bad for everybody at the RC conversation, which I think is true. But I do think that that sort of lends a little bit of evidence to kind of what I was saying too, which is just like there's all these external factors that Wizards cannot really control when it comes to actual tournaments. And so it's better to just say we're gonna this is the metric that we're using, and it's something that everybody can find out what it is pretty easily. I think I prefer this to what's been going on the last couple of years.
Sure. Agree. Well said. Sounds like someone listened to our last episode.
Maybe I did. Maybe I did. I was, chilling in a hot tub eating turkey legs and
oh man.
Have you guys seen those Costco pumpkin pies? Have you seen those Costco pumpkin
they're
pies?
They're enormous. It's like 18 inches in diameter.
There was like 5 of us at this dinner, and we somehow ate the Costco pumpkin pie over like 3 days. It was I'm never going to recover. I'm never going to recover from this.
Let's talk about Pioneer.
Okay.
Okay. We want Pioneer to provide as diverse an experience as possible. Okay, flat out, first thing they said. We want Pioneer to provide as diverse an experience as possible. It is a place where you can have fun using cards from past standard environments without content being printed directly into it. Please keep that the same, WotC.
Yes.
Or having content naturally rotate out of it. Our plan is to return to a more active role in managing Pioneer. Moving forward, we'll be actively using our main set release, banned and restricted announcement cadence to take better care of Pioneer. This sounds like a mea culpa.
Yeah, just wanted to kind of quickly point out for the listeners who may have not been following Pioneer since its inception, back when Pioneer was first introduced as a format, they would frequently have ban announcements, sometimes even every single week, but frequently at least once a month, sometimes every other week. And it was kind of, what they were really getting the format to where they wanted it to be. And ever since then, it's kind of, they maybe have not done so as much. Now, are we going to go back to every single month? Probably not, but this is a nice step forward.
I'm really surprised when they mentioned that the last cards that were banned in Pioneer were June 7th, 2022. Do you all remember what cards were banned in June of 2022?
Expressive iteration.
Luris, Expressive. I think that was the Winota ban too, right?
It was EI and Winota. Yeah, it was not. Luris had already been banned.
Okay.
Yeah, at this point, I have to assume, since otherwise I haven't been playing the best deck in Pioneer. But that's surprising to me.
Bit of a mea culpa, right? It's kind of like, hey, we haven't been paying as close enough attention to Pioneer as we could. We'll be focusing on this in the B&R cadence, which is like every 3 or so months with all the new set releases.
But why do we think they haven't been paying attention to Pioneer, as quote unquote paying attention to Pioneer as much as they could?
I don't know.
I do not know.
Well, I think part of it was probably format popularity. I at least for MTGO, which is a data source that we see, the Pioneer leagues were always noticeably smaller than the modern leagues. Perhaps they saw from the RCQ cycle that was not necessarily the case in paper play, and that a lot of people were very engaged, though.
I think you could also look at kind of the same stuff that we do a bit, which is like, hey, all these decks are like 45 to 55%. This seems like a quote unquote healthy format.
And it hasn't changed a lot. Really, if you look at last year's RCs, what decks were popular for them, like when we went to Atlanta last year, it's not, the decks aren't that much different. I mean, there's a few new ones, of course, Devin, as we've learned about a couple different times, but there's still Rakdos mid, there's still mono green here and there's still like Phoenix, there's still other thing, Lotus, like a lot of them are similar, and so maybe they felt for a while, like you said, that stability was a positive, but maybe they're realizing that it's not quite as positive as it should be. And certainly this first ban really is about, hey, maybe things have gotten stale more than anything else, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting too, though, that we have seen somewhat recently, especially like the release of one card or a couple cards has dramatically shifted the metagame, even with established decks, right? Like with the printing of Sleight of Hand, pushing, and other metagame factors, pushing Phoenix back into like a tier 1 position.
Picklock Prankster.
Yeah, and things like Burrow's Convoke kind of
Modane's
showing
Recruiter.
up. Yeah, or even just like Rakdos Sacrifice making like a big comeback and going from popular deck to not so popular back to one of the tier 1, tier 2 strategies. I'm a little bit surprised. I think that's why you can look at that rather and say, hey, Pioneer seems fine. Decks come and go. We get new decks people are experimenting with. Sometimes they stick around, and that's good enough. But lurking behind all this time was the big bad Karn, the Great Creator, which is now banned. And what they said here is that even though the metagame share, I love stuff like this, even though the metagame share and win rate of mono green Nykthos decks, they call them, have been within a reasonable range, the deck has simply been a large component of the Pioneer metagame for most of the format's lifetime. This is going directly to what you said, Dave, right? Which is just like, hey, this deck has been around and been popular and been good forever.
Also, this is the deck that they've been banning cards out of since week 1.
Yes.
Yeah, right? There's, 3 cards banned out of it now? Or I guess Oath of Nissa went and came back, but...
Devin, the Great Creator, on camera now.
I'm sad.
I mean, I can honestly say, from my heart, Devin, and don't take this the wrong way, I literally do not care about this ban. I hate Karn, the Great Creator.
I hate it too.
Okay. And I hate Mono Green Devotion.
Me too.
I've never wanted to play this deck or play against this deck. So good riddance, I say.
My wallet doesn't hate it, but...
Yeah. Yikes. I mean, it's definitely based on more of a feels than like reals thing for me there, but it is what it is. Like, I don't like playing against Tron in Modern. I don't like playing against this deck in Pioneer either. So
I will say I do have a fondness. It was mono green, like Walkers, as it was mostly called, deck in the early days of this deck. I liked playing that a lot with like Nissa, Who Shakes the World, and Vivian, and just doing stuff like that was great before people discovered a lot of the infinite combos, or kind of the, Karn had more of a narrow wish board and things like that. I did enjoy that. It was quite good back then too, but it wasn't quite the force that it became later on.
Just to give you an idea of how long this deck has been dominant for, the Magic Online Championship showcase that I won with Mono Green Karn was 2.5 years ago, and it really was not that much different. Like, I think I played Nissa, Who Shakes the World, and some other like weirdo planeswalkers, but it still had like 15 one-ofs and a Karn sideboard. So yeah, it's been around for a while.
Yeah.
So the rationale here, though, is that the force of Mono-Green Devotion causes the metagame to either try to go underneath it or try to ignore what it's doing with their own combo strategy, effectively bending the metagame due to its existence. The consistency and strength of the deck also make it very difficult for various types of fair mid-range strategies to exist. Rakdos mid-range? I don't know.
I don't know.
Seems like it's existing fine.
Sure. That clause of that sentence is a little sus to me, but okay.
So, Karn's range is so broad, it can facilitate convoluted infinite combos. I agree, they are convoluted, that make the format less approachable. Okay, that's a little bit of a fun factor thing, at little to no opportunity cost. Additionally, Karn's ability to naturally suppress artifacts is likely keeping a spread of interesting cards from being played. While it's recently been on the decline, blah, 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 it's clear that the deck has had a warping effect on the metagame for too long, and for these reasons, KTGC is banned. Okay. Any thoughts on this rationale?
The only thing that I want to kind of critique about this, now, don't get me wrong, I hate Karn as much as the next person, but they did say, they make the format at little to no opportunity cost. There is a massive opportunity cost with losing your sideboard. So, again, I hate Karn as much as the next person, but it really is not, no opportunity cost. You lose your entire sideboard.
Yeah. My biggest question here, I guess, Shane, are we okay with talking about this in context about like what happens next? Because I think this is kind of its own self-contained little thing.
Whatever you want to talk about, Dave. It's your conversation. I'm just in it.
We're just vibing.
Does this kill this deck? I don't think this kills this deck. It's just a different deck now, kind of, right? It's a slightly different deck.
You know what's funny? I actually lost to Mono Green Devotion on stream today with no Karn.
There you go.
They just turned 4 Oldemog to me, and like that was just good enough.
Yeah. I mean, are they doing? Did it look like you could tell kind of what this person was trying instead of Karn?
They had
Is Vivian back?
They had some weird stuff. They had like Collected Company, Burning Tree Emissary. So I don't know if you would want to play Collected Company, but yeah, I think that there are versions. Like I was kind of crafting up one a couple of days ago because we all kind of assumed, like in my Discord, we assumed that it was going to go. So we were kind of theory crafting like what it looked like without Karn, and it was just like Vivian Arcbow Ranger, a couple sideboard bullets like within Ulamog obviously, and then just like Burning Tree Emissary back the way that it used to be. And that deck was good before Karn. So
yeah, and
I'm
so it
rubbing
goes.
my hands together. Just thinking about that.
One really nice thing. So yes, the deck is probably still playable without Karn, but Karn, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. It really puts a lot of pressure on the control decks and the mid-range decks because it feels like you just have kind of this endless like value or resource loop, and the deck is a lot more susceptible to 1-for-1 removal without having the additional like 2 or 3-for-1 that Karn was.
That's a good way to put it.
Is losing the combo option truly significant for this deck? Like, I honestly have not played with or against this in forever, and it was really after the combos were discovered that I faced it even less frequently, and just from my interaction with Pioneer. So I don't really know how much people were actually using that particular tech.
Doesn't come up that much.
They always have access to it, though. Like you always keep the, I don't even remember what the card's called anymore. It's the Chain Veil.
Yeah, and the Cauldron.
Yeah, the Cauldron. Like you always keep those in the sideboard because they do end games. So whether or not.
So does Cavalier of Thorns.
That's right.
So does, I forgot the name of the giant Coco.
Storm the
Festival.
Storm,
yeah. So, okay. So I don't know if there's a lot more to say about Karn going. Obviously, we'll talk about winners and losers overall maybe once we get to the end of this Pioneer section. But, I don't think you should like sell off your Nykthoses right now if you are someone who plays mono green.
I feel like Nykthos probably is safer in general, because for a long time people were saying that maybe Nykthos is the problem in this deck, and it makes me feel like they keep banning around Nykthos. They keep banning all these payoff cards and letting the engine survive. So maybe, like, unless mono green really goes over the top yet again, they might just let Nykthos exist the way they've let Treasure Cruise exist.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that, Stan, which is I imagine that one of their identities for green in the format is a devotion strategy, right? Like much like blue gets the card draw stuff and other decks, of course, but it's the counter magic, card advantage, and green has things like elves and things like devotion. So let's keep that going for a while and see if we can maintain those identities without being as annoying or as potentially busted as Karn.
Well, see, my kind of question is, are we approaching like a brainstorm territory in Legacy, where if you look at the Pioneer ban list, now we have Leyline of Abundance, only banned because of green, Karn, banned because of green, Oath of Nissa used to be banned, then unbanned, only because of green. Like, is this just going to keep happening? Where they're going to print some other card that's good with green devotion, and we're going to be having this conversation in a year and a half? It's like, at what point do we just have to, get rid of the problem?
I think it's a great question. I don't have an answer for that question, but it's certainly the way I kind of feel about it too, which is just like, okay, like, is Storm the Festival going to be the next thing that we ban?
Yeah.
But I don't know. We'll have to see how good the deck even is at this point, but I don't know. Green people want a good ramp deck in a lot of formats, and this is what it is in Pioneer, and I think people should be happy that it's still playable now, you know what I mean? Which seems fine, and we'll see how good it is after what else happens here.
And I think importantly, like Devin mentioned, is it frees up the sideboard in a lot of interesting ways. So, like, you aren't locked into playing like 12 of the same wishboard tutors that you've had for a couple of years. You get to mix it up a little bit, see what you can do. You get more sky lashers or whatever for the spirits.
Oh yeah.
It's a test and petitioner for the aggressive decks.
Yeah.
I remember playing that in the early iterations of that. It was like, yeah, oh man, I get my life gain green card. Geological Appraiser, being able to win the game on the spot on turn 3 with Geological Appraiser puts too much pressure on folks to be a good thing for the long-term health of the format. The end.
You know what's so funny about this to me is it reminds me so much of the way that people used to talk about Splinter Twin. Just like the turn four format is now Pioneer. I mean, we've said this before, but just to see that in another announcement where it's like, we don't want people to win on turn 3 in Modern. Oh, whoops. Okay, I guess we don't want people to win on turn 3 in Pioneer anymore. So let's just move that line back in the sand a little bit further.
Yeah, I mean, I think importantly, this doesn't meet our long-term vision for the format. Again, talking about options, where players can enjoy a variety of macro strategies before losing the game so early. If every deck must run 1 or 2 mana interaction spells, the format shrinks. For these reasons, Geological Appraiser is banned. You could say, I guess, similar things about Winota, having to run interaction.
I was just, you brought it up. I was going to say, this is basically the exact same reason they gave for Winota being banned. It's just it puts too much pressure on the format. Now, Winota didn't necessarily kill you on the spot sometimes it did. But yeah, it's basically just the exact same philosophy behind the Winota ban.
But what about Greasefang, guys?
Well, I think we'll talk about that in the winners section, perhaps.
Yeah.
We'll keep an eye on Quintorius decks in Pioneer. It can win as early as turn 4, blah, 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 blah. But people can set up their own game plan and prepare for the pivotal turn more successfully, etc., etc. So Quintorius, as we know, did not do well. And unless things shift a little bit more, it probably won't continue. It probably will continue to not be so great. So they did mention it, but Geological Appraiser was clearly the one that was doing better. They didn't like it. They didn't like the pressure it put on the format, and there it goes. We barely knew ye, Geological Appraiser,
and that's fine, right?
I mean, totally. That's like a Tybalt's trickery type thing, right? It's just like, hey, this is a mistake, and this is what this is designed to do. This entire ban window is, hey, this happened. It wasn't what we intended. Get it out of here.
Sorry, Devin.
It's okay. Yeah, I was gonna bring up. I feel bad for people who are planning on playing us in Atlanta. Yeah, it sucks, but it is what it is.
You probably had better decks to play. You didn't really want to play that deck, did you?
I definitely did.
I mean, you agree that it wasn't you don't have any problems with the ban happening, though, right?
No, not at all. I think the format, honestly, like, if they hadn't banned it before Atlanta, I think I wouldn't have been surprised if it was like 30 to 35% of the format. Because the thing about the deck was like, yes, it is disruptible, but like, it's just the fact that it's so explosive. I think the deck was kind of cracked, and I'm pretty happy they banned it.
All right.
Okay.
So let's talk about the fun part now.
Yes, please. Let's do this.
Smuggler's Copter is unbanned. We banned Smuggler's Copter back in December 2019. Since then, many new sets have entered the format.
Many sets are saying.
Exactly.
Many sets are entering the format.
And as such, the format has naturally grown in power over time. While unbanning is not something we do very often, we believe the format can absorb it successfully, as can Dave's wallet. Reintroducing it will create new deck building puzzles or revive old ones and provide additional diversity. Not sure they're puzzles. Smuggler's Copter is unbanned. I was thrilled about this because I love Smuggler's Copter as a card. Just generally, I loved playing it I played a lot of Kaladesh Limited. At the time, I played a lot of it in that limited format. It was one of the times I thought about picking up Standard, so I ended up playing it in Pioneer a good amount when it was legal. Not in black, but in different decks. But I love Smuggler's Copter. It's one of my favorite cards.
Agreed. I feel like we've been beating this drum for a long time on the podcast that we've wanted to see Smuggler's Copter unbanned. I think that's a card that a lot of people have wanted to see unbanned. I do want to point out an interesting, I don't know if this is a contrast, but the opening line of this section is, we want Pioneer to provide as diverse an experience as possible. And in this paragraph on Copter, they talk about how they think reintroducing it will create new deck building puzzles and provide additional diversity. When it was initially banned, I think part of the problem was that it was too homogenizing.
Yes, and this is actually the thing that I'm worried. Like, I love this card. I'm not sure it was a great thing to unban. Personally, we'll have to see what happens. I'm thrilled that they did it because I like to play aggressive decks that can use a 3/3 flyer that costs 2 mana.
Yeah, and I wonder on some level if they recognize that like Pioneer needs some more aggressive decks, and it's become very combo centric, and either aggro decks that can get under combo decks or just combo decks. Like Blue-White Control wasn't very strong until the Discovery combo emerged, in my opinion. So I think we're going to maybe see like this era this week or two where every deck is running Smuggler's Copter because it is kind of good everywhere, and we just have to wait for the cream to rise.
Yeah, exactly.
I was trying to find the original article from when it was banned, which I can't remember. This looked like it was December 2019, which I couldn't find, but I did find an excerpt in a Star City column. It says, Wizards believes that this set of changes will ultimately result in greater diversity among aggressive decks, a clearer role in the metagame for reactive and controlling decks, and a push towards better color balance among competitive decks. So I think, like what Stan was saying, a big part of the reason why it was banned, 4 years ago at this time, was because it almost felt like every single deck was playing it. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. I don't know if this is a great idea to unban this card. It almost feels like if your deck has any creature whatsoever in it that can crew it, which is literally any creature, there's almost no reason not to play this card.
Yeah. Let's just talk about this now, because I have a whole section. I did a little digging back in late 2019. Because
you went all the way back to late 2019?
Yeah, it's
time travel.
Personally,
I did. I got my DeLorean.
Copters. Shane, your Copters.
It's about the Copters, Smarty. So let's talk about stuff that can run Copter. And in 2019, my memory was it was really big in
Your
mono
memory
black.
was wrong.
Yes, it was wrong. I'll be wrong about this. So my memory was like, okay, this is primarily in mono black. That's really it, because mono black synergized really well with discarding cards because it had things like Scrap Heap Scrounger, Bloodsoaked Champion that could come back out of the graveyards. I think at some point they were running the little Skelly Man that could also come back from the graveyard, but it was in a lot more. There was a Simic deck. Of course, it was running Oko. But, Mana Elves, Lovestruck Beast, Steel Leaf Champion, Questing Beast. There was Gruul aggro decks effectively doing the same thing, but with red creatures and Mana Dorks.
Did you just say Oko? So wait, hold on. Smuggler's Copter was banned before Oko?
I think they might have been banned simultaneously, or was Oko to March or January?
Oko was banned. I just found this a minute ago. Let me see.
Oh, no. I didn't even remember that. I'm too old.
Give me 1 sec. So the November 18th banned and restricted announcement from 2019 was, it was no Pioneer.
This is
it must have been after.
Oof.
Yeah, I think it was after.
It was.
I think Oko didn't get banned until like February, like January, February, something like that.
Yeah, it was around for longer than it should have been. So, and it was also even in things like mono red aggro with, spells, prowess creatures also running some number of smugglers copters frequently.
I played it on blue-white flash deck that was pretty good.
Yeah.
For a while, too. That Reflector Mage was in before
that was
Reflector
an early
Mage.
one. I remember that. Yeah. It wasn't everything like Spirits. Golgari had an aggro deck. Phoenix, of course, wasn't running it, but it was really prevalent, even in stuff that wasn't like recurring stuff out of the graveyard. It's just, in the air, gets you card selection, all that good stuff. I guess the question, of course, do you think we even need to read this card? I think some people might not even know what Smuggler's Copter is.
I think you should read it.
Two mana artifact.
Yes.
It's a 3/3 flying vehicle.
Ooh, yeah.
When cruise 1.
Nice.
That's the thing. Whenever it attacks or blocks, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. So Looter Scooter was the nickname.
Do you remember how we were kind of excited about Subterranean Schooner when we did the Lost Caverns of Ixalan spoilers? Just forget about it.
2 mana 3/3 flying looter. That's good. I would play that.
Crew 1.
Colorless.
Crew 1.
Colorless.
Seems
and
okay.
why is it especially good in Pioneer is because there is no lightning bolt in Pioneer.
Oh, yes, you're right. It passes the Bone Crusher Giant and Shock Test.
Mm-hmm.
I found a tournament, a Pioneer PTQ from Magic Online, November 30th. There were, in the top 32, 9 copies of Mono Black Aggro and a total of 71 copies of Copter in the top 32, which is 56% of the decks. So it was a lot.
That's a lot.
Seems okay.
I was also just taking a look to see what kind of removal we have now that didn't exist when Copter was first banned. And among the top decks, there's no new removal, with the exception, I think, of like Gleeful Demolition and Get Lost.
Yeah, Gleeful.
Leyline Binding.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a thing. It was a popular thing. But does this matter now, right? And like Devin, you were saying, like, is every creature deck going to run this? And based on what we saw before, 4 years ago, of course, like, lots of aggro strategies were running it, even if they weren't leveraging the graveyard.
Right, yeah, exactly. There was like Gruul decks. I'm looking at all these different decks. Rakdos aggro, Gruul aggro, Esper human, Celestia aggro, Simic aggro. Just like the card itself, because it is so, it's not that hard to meet the conditions to be able to put it in your deck. You just have to have any random body. I've even thought about, should Blue-White Control be playing this because they have Wandering Emperor to make tokens. And I'm serious when I say that. It's like the card is that powerful. And there's a lot of decks that can play this card.
Well, let's talk about the premier aggro strategies in Pioneer right now, right? Like, we've got Boros Convoke, Boros Legends, which is kind of new, not established yet. Gruul aggro. We've got humans, mono white humans. The Spirits decks and mono red is still lingering around. Do any of these decks?
How dare you forget? Wait! How dare you just forget about Boros Heroic, which is still a pretty good deck?
Okay, Heroic,
it's probably better than the Legends one.
All the Boros decks.
That's probably
what's
true.
Running of these? What's running Copter? Beyond like an initial curiosity, like, does it need to synergize? Is there time to cast it? Do you want to cast it? I don't know. I don't have an answer for this.
I think it's actually fantastic in Convoke. Not only because it's another target for Gleeful Demolition, that you can use it defensively, Demolition in this case, rather than just like blowing up an Ornithopter, but you're producing like so many 1/1s that this then helps you like get to your Venerated Loxodons or whatever else is important for you to kind of like go wide and go big, or it just lets you go over clogged up boards too.
Yeah, 100%. If you remember a couple, when we talked about Warden of the Inner Sky as being a really good card in this deck, Copter does essentially the same thing that Warden of the Inner Sky does, except it can't get big. And it actually draws you cards instead of just scrying. So it's like this deck all of a sudden is playing 8 Wardens of the Inner Sky. Or I don't know what the final count will be, what they actually have space for. But it seems like it fits perfectly in this deck for sure.
One thing I did kind of want to bring up, Shane mentioned Spirits as kind of one of the premier aggro decks. Spirits is probably the absolute single biggest loser out of this total ban announcement, because not only are you banning one of its best matchups, actually 2 of its best matchups, because it was very good against green and very good against the Discover combo decks. Also, I don't know if you've ever tried to play a deck full of 1/1 and 2/2 flyers against your turn 2 Smuggler's Copter opponent, but it's not fun.
Seems bad, Bront.
Yeah. So Spirit's big loser.
But then another list that I thought of immediately was Gruul aggro. Honestly, like the Gruul vehicles list, quote unquote. I mean, it's just because it has an 8-pack of elves, right? Like, I don't know why, if you have 8 elves, why would you not have Smuggler's Copter as part of your whole story? It's just going to help turn those into real cards in the late game so much better.
Yeah, and it's called Gruul Vehicles, so this fits perfectly.
Yeah. Exactly.
That funny you mentioned Gruul because that was the first deck that I played on stream today. Once the Copter Copter unban went live, and I went 3-2 in the first league that I played, but every single time that I drew Copter, it felt unbelievably good. And also the really awesome thing about Gruul specifically is the way that the deck is constructed. It's a bunch of 1s and a bunch of 3s, and when they fatal push your 1-drop, you don't have a good 2-drop to play, and this is the best possible 2-drop that you could hope to ever have.
Yep.
You guys are making me really hyped that I still have my playset, by the way.
I mean, I even have, of course, another. We were just talking about creature lists right now, but remember how good mono white aggro was for a while?
No.
I feel like this card is also no joke in that deck.
Yep.
Stan's like, I always hated that deck. Doesn't matter.
What was mono white aggro?
Humans.
It's just humans?
Just humans.
Oh, then
Yeah.
yes, I do remember that.
But this is like, crew it with your Dauntless Bodyguard. Crew it with your Giant Killer that you don't want to play ever. Like, crew it with your Hopeful Initiate that gets paused on something. Like, there's a lot of stuff.
Another deck that we really haven't mentioned yet is Rakdos Sacrifice, but hear me out for a second. Not only does Cauldron Familiar crew Smuggler's Copter, you can also discard Cauldron Familiar to the Smuggler's Copter.
Why would you do this to me?
It's insane in that deck too. You could also discard Croxa to it. Yeah. I don't know. I cannot. There's just so many. I just want to keep playing. I just want to keep playing with this card. I played with it for like 7 hours today. It was so good.
Let me ask you about the weirdest, or the not weirdest choice, but I think a lot of people think that it might also get played in Rakdos midrange. Is there but Derek, of course, Misplaced Ginger had an all caps tweet that somebody shared with me that said, Reckoner Bankbuster is better than Smuggler's Copter.
I saw.
Thoughts? Concerns? What do you think?
I mean, that deck.
I don't know if I should necessarily air my thoughts or if I should keep it SFW. I'm just kidding. I don't know. My question to Derek would be, has he ever cast the card Smuggler's Copter before? Because I think that statement is kind of insane to me.
We know that he has. He definitely has.
That's fair. I know.
He's been playing Magic for a long time.
That is
definitely
true.
has.
I think I would sooner play Bankbuster and Blue-White than Copter, to be honest.
Yeah.
For the game plans.
Those specific decks, I think there are some examples, and I was mostly just being facetious, but there are definitely some examples of decks that would rather play Bankbuster. Maybe Rakdos Mid is one. Maybe you want to play a split. Maybe you want to be like a couple of Bankbusters and a couple of Smuggler's Copters because you want that type of evasion. But yeah, I don't think it's necessarily like cut and dry play. This X is better than Y. I think there are certain circumstances in which case Y is better than X.
Yeah, but I think the bottom line with Copter, as we think about moving on from this, is it's going to see a lot of play, right? It's going to see a lot of play, and this is the thing that's the biggest force on the meta game. Banning Karn is a big deal, but unbanning Smuggler's Copter is going to take a while to figure out for us to see exactly what happens to the meta game as a result of it. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. I don't know 100% what deck I'm playing in Atlanta, but I know it's going to have 4 Smuggler's Copter. I can guarantee you that.
Oh, look at you. Calling it right now.
I'm interested to see what happens. Besides every creature deck, apparently, let's talk about some other winners for Pioneer. I want to start with, I looked up Mono Green Devotion's most lopsided matchups on mtgmeta.io, and they include the following: Enigmatic Incarnation 61, Rakdos Mid 65, Greasefang 64, Creativity 73, Gruul Aggro 69, nice, Omnath to Light 67. So, those are some strong win rates against some popular and not so popular decks. But out of all these, I'm going to look at you first, Evan, because you have the most experience with the Pioneer metagame, relative strengths and weaknesses. Do you see any of these that you're like, well, I definitely think I'm going to start seeing more of this because green's out of here? Or is less popular, at least.
So other than Rakdos Mid itself, my inclination would be to look at these decks and see which one has a good Rakdos matchup, because I think probably the single biggest change that's going to happen is more Rakdos, because we see a downtick in green and a downtick in the geological decks, which I think were both somewhat favored against Rakdos. So if you look at this list, I think the one that stands out to me the most is probably Enigmatic. That deck completely destroys Rakdos. I'm sure that Rakdos players will tell you it's almost unwinnable from their side. So I would definitely look towards Enigmatic Incarnation. Similar vein, Creativity. I think that deck is pretty good against Rakdos. So I would look at those two decks where, if they were getting beat up by green before, now you're kind of that space in the metagame is being occupied by Rakdos now, and those decks are really good against Rakdos.
Makes good sense. Anything else besides like the MGD matchups that you think has like a pretty strong up arrow next to it, even though most of the format is kind of staying the same, kind of ignoring the recent blip with the Discovery decks, I suppose, because that was like 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
One thing that I'm not really sure is like where blue-white's going to go, because blue-white lost its bets matchup in the geological deck. So I'm kind of curious to see what happens to blue-white.
2 words. Ensoul Artifact.
I mean, it's got a Copter. It's got other artifacts.
It's got a 1-mana flyer that makes an artifact now.
You can ensoul the Copter and it loots. It swings for 5. It flies. It loots.
Yeah.
I love it.
I cast Ensoul Artifact today.
Dude, I saw your list. I saw it. Piqued my interest.
Can I open one can of worms before we leave Pioneer and go on to Modern?
Please.
I am somewhat surprised or very surprised that Fable the Mirrorbreaker is still a card in this format after this ban announcement, given what they said about Karn. I kind of feel like a good amount of the rationale for why Karn got banned could also have easily been applied to Fable, and the same logic could almost be applied to Rakdos. So I'm surprised by that a little bit.
It was on the bingo sheet I made for the Discord. I had Fable the Mirrorbreaker banned in Pioneer. It did not happen. I thought that I kind of thought they would hit both. Honestly, they've been so prevalent, so popular, 50+% decks for so long. It's like, why would you hit Mono Green Devotion, which one of its strongest matchups was Rakdos, and not hit Rakdos? And it's a bit surprising.
I will say one last final note, with that specifically, like if you're comparing the two decks, at least the Rakdos play patterns, they're not necessarily they're not as like egregious as playing against Karn you know what I mean? It's like there's actually interaction to be had in those matchups where it's against green, it's just like 2 ships passing in the night kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That totally makes sense. The play patterns better.
All right, Pioneer. We are done, I think. We are to where perhaps more people want to hear our takes, which is Modern. So bear with us. We'll do a quick ad read. We'll come back and we'll talk about Fury and maybe some other card I don't care as much about. So stay with us. David.
Shane.
Dave, I feel like we haven't done an ad together in a minute.
We haven't, and the holiday season is here, Shane.
Oh yes, it's a perfect time to spend money, specifically at Barrister and Mann.
Yep. For people that you love, and they got all kinds of new stuff there to check out.
Speaking of new stuff, we are both holding 2 of the 4 new winter shaving soaps, fragrances, body soaps, all that good stuff. Comes with a bunch of stuff. Mm-hmm. We have Midnight Special and Brayburn. And Dave, you said you're into Brayburn.
Yes.
So I'm gonna do an open, and we can give some takes.
Okay, so you're gonna smell Brayburn.
I want to smell Brayburn.
Okay.
I smell apples. I smell spices.
Yep.
I smell some wood. It smells like fresh squeezed apple juice.
And here it is. We've been feeling the need for a good apple scent for a while, something clean and crisp and fresh without the smoke and heavy spices that you would find in apple fragrances these days. A little green, perhaps, not sweet or pie-like or cidery. There it is. Sage, orange, and apple balanced out against the lightest touch of spice and wood. But apple is the star. And I love it.
I think this is the most on-the-nose description that Will has provided at Barrister and Mann. I think that's a perfect description. It's awesome.
Check Brayburn out. It's my favorite of the new scents that we got. Now, I'm going to check out Midnight Special.
Yeah, I like Midnight Special a lot.
We just got finished recording a Midnight Special with Stan.
Yes, a 2 a.m. special. So this is a lot lighter.
It is, but it's got this kind of more traditional kind of... Reminds me a little more of a talky kind of wood scent.
Yeah, so Will says it's a stylish blend of sandalwood, cypriol, nutmeg, a poponax, my favorite, black peppercorn, I do get that, and rasped wood, which I also get.
I love that.
What I like about it is it's other sandalwoods, I will admit, I think sandalwood's a strong scent. I think this is way dialed back. I think it has like that sort of light, like almost aquatic touch, and I like the little spiciness from the black peppercorn. I like using this shaving soap a lot. It's going in my rotation. I'm gonna get a jar for sure.
Nice.
Before it's out for the season. So
now I do want to say there is one holiday tradition that at Barrister Man that we haven't talked about before, and that is that they are re-releasing Dickens soon, which is a fragrance that they've had at different points in time. But this is inspired by one of Will's favorite holiday cookies. And if you want a recipe for, because I know people in our audience love recipes. I talk about chili one time 3 years ago, and people still pop in the Discord to ask me for the recipe sometimes.
This is true. This happens.
So go and check out the recipe in the blog section on barristerman.com for Dickens cherry cardamom cookies with maraschino cherries, and got some cream cheese in there, some buttermilk, some cardamom. Sounds pretty amazing to me.
We'll eat. So yes, go over to Barrister and Man, get yourself or your loved ones some gifts, and you can use code THEDIVEDOWN23 with 23 spelled out like the words. Gets you 15% off of your first order over at Barrister and Man. All right, we're back here to talk about Modern, talk about Fury. First off, the card that I actually did cash out on. I got, but I didn't do it right away. I didn't cash out on my playset. I cashed out on like the extras that I bought when they were like $4 back in the day. I did sell those over time. So I think I might have like 5 or 6 Furies. So I did not. I probably have some left over I couldn't get rid of. But all right, enough about my finances. What did Watsy say? So when we spoke about Modern last August, we were concerned about the new cards from the Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth, TM, namely Orcish Bowmasters and the One
Have you
Ring.
seen our holiday set?
Have you guys heard about Assassin's Creed? It's coming soon. While these cards are powerful players in the metagame, another card has continued to suppress what's possible in the format even more, Fury. Most often played as a 4/4 double striker that clears the opponent's board, makes playing with creature decks nearly impossible. Rakdos of Oak has only risen in metagame share since the Pro Tour this summer, and coming in right behind it is 4-color Omnath, also featuring Fury, FT, Fury. Played in a smattering of other decks as well. Fury is here we go again, diversity. Fury is keeping several diverse and interesting strategies at bay, and for this reason, Fury is banned in Modern. They also talk about Scam. Without Fury, the opportunity cost of playing so many undying effects increases, reducing consistency in the deck and becoming a real cost to include. They kind of specifically say, hey, these might become like Orzhov decks that use Solitude or Ephemerate, but a re-brought Solitude is not as threatening as a 4/4 double striker.
Yeah,
and
but LOL, that card sucks.
Yeah,
not really, but...
It's not quite as good as a 4/4 double striker on an empty board. We believe the removal of Fury will, again, options, widen the format, allowing players to explore additional strategies, especially with low toughness creatures, and the reduction of Rakdos Scam decks will also reduce the total number of Grief and Orcish Bowmasters players will encounter. Thoughts on this rationale before the effect of losing Fury, the rationale itself, anything. Does this make sense?
So it actually does to me. I thought this was very sound rationale. I like the idea that I think they're testing, which is like, people are really complaining about Grief. We need to take a card out of 2 decks simultaneously, basically. Not being able to have as many good Scam openers, like, actually seems like a good way to lower the Grief rate as well. And I almost wonder if this is actually kind of soft banning Not Dead after all.
I don't know. See, let me play devil's advocate here. The kind of the problem I have with this is this might be a bit of a hot take, because I know a lot of people were a little, at least decent amount of people were happy on Twitter. Obviously, Twitter is going to be Twitter and all that stuff. But I don't know. It kind of feels to me that if people start picking up the black-white scam, I understand that, you never want a turn 1 Solitude. Who cares if your opponent makes a turn 1 4/3 lifelink? It doesn't have any ETPs. I get that. But without Fury and they're just playing Grief and Solitude, it kind of makes when they do have the turn 1 Grief, it kind of makes it more demoralizing because you know that they only have 4 copies of the evoke creature now, and it's like, I don't know if that leads to more field bads. I personally, I think that Grief was kind of the problem the entire time, and I would have rather have them hit Grief and maybe let Fury stay, but I don't know. Is that, am I crazy for thinking that?
So I agree to some extent that like Grief felt more like a problem. I will go out on a limb and say black-white scam is not happening. Like we tried it and it wasn't good.
Yeah. And I mean, I was talking about this in the Discord today. Like, I specifically was doing a lot with like the Orzhov Reanimator strategies that involved some Grief, some Solitude as sort of side game plans, ways to interact with the opponent, some Ephemerate stuff, some Stoneforge was in there as well. And while it was quite fun, I enjoyed the deck, and this is one of the last decks I remember even doing a good amount of tuning with and playing with. I don't think it really ever got anywhere. And I don't know if the increased iteration in Scam as like a core strategy and the Undying effects rather than just focusing on stuff like Ephemerate, if that adds more to the strategy. I think people will definitely try. I'm curious to see where it goes, but I think the rationale is sound, which is just like, hey, having the backup scam threat of not being Fury and not providing that incredible clock is really taking this deck down a peg.
I have concerns as well of Devin and Stan kind of like matching where you guys are at, that like maybe this wasn't enough. I don't know though. We'll see. I mean, I do think this deck has such a fine, like the Evoke deck has such a sort of fine line between being awful and great, that this package really might not be able to survive with only one scam threat in it, basically.
Yeah.
And so, the only other thing that we've seen a little bit of is there were some people in our Discord who were trying to brew like blue-black scam for a while, where it was like, oh, we're going to play subtlety instead, and like maybe that's a thing that we can do. And that also seems bad in the same way Solitude seems bad, but at least it flies. So maybe that's kind of cool. But
someone that I'm in a WhatsApp chat group here in Northern England made an interesting comment in the last week. As like the public opinion turned on Fury, basically, that not only have we tried black-white Ephemerate decks and they didn't really pan out, but Scam didn't really become, and really Grief didn't really become a scary thing until Grief was backed by Fury. And I think if we look at what else makes the Rakdos Fury decks good, it's like the occasional turn 1 Ragavan. It's the occasional Turbo Blood Moon. It's access to Fable of the Mirrorbreaker or Spyro. And I think when you lose Fury, I think you're just less incentivized to play Grief with those other cards. And I know in the past we've kind of posited, like, what happens if people can't Grief Scam? Like, they'll just play Rakdos midrange in a much more fair way, and maybe the feel bads are reduced for that reason as well.
Yeah, it might even become Jund. You know what I mean? Again, I do
think
think that
Dave, let's not say things you can't unsay.
I'm just saying though, like what you're talking about though, like a Ragavan move into a fast Blood Moon, Orcish Bowmasters, Fable of the Mirrorbreaker deck, I think is still going to be a thing. I don't know how good it's going to be right now, but like I said, I think I said even on the episode where we talked about whether these cards are going to be banned like 6 weeks ago or so, when we first kind of broached the subject during the last ban window, it was like, I think that Rakdos Mid was a deck before this. It was a deck during this. It'll be some kind of deck after this, and it's always kind of like one deck away from being or one card away from being a really, really good deck. And we've left the era of it being a really good deck for a minute, I think, right now. But yeah, I agree. I don't think people are. I think ultimately it'll out that like Scam plus Not Dead After All plus a little bit of fun with Not Dead After All occasionally on other creatures is not going to be enough to make it worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I keep going back to the reason that Scam was so prevalent and while not being completely broken was the consistency across matchups, right? Not the consistency of the core deck strategy itself, although it was pretty consistent, but the fact that it had so many different ways to beat so many different things, and removing Fury gets rid of one of the primary ways. And therefore it'll lessen some of its consistency across so many different decks. Like you look at the MTG meta thing, and it's like 80% green because it's like 52, 53. It has better, of course, but it's just one of those decks that it's not bad against a lot, and this makes it worse against quite a number of decks, and that's probably enough to just make it another type of deck in Modern if it survives in some way, shape, or form, because it doesn't have access to Fury. And that's what they want.
One other thing that I just kind of thought about here. Now, obviously, there, without Fury, you still have the turn 1 grief draws, but then also, Not Dead After All is still just pretty good with Bowmaster and Dothy Voidwalker, because like you can just go, undie my things, my Voidwalker, sack my Voidwalker, get it back. So I almost wonder if maybe like Rakdos players will still try to just play like a similar Not Dead After All shell, even if you don't have Furies. What do you guys think about that?
I think they'll try. I don't think it's going to be good, personally. Like, I just feel like those things were extra value. Like, the scenarios that you brought up are totally all true. Devin, like, plus Bowmasters, plus Voidwalker. But I think those are things that you did to sort of cope with the fact that you have a bad draft card in your deck.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair.
And it's the high end that made it okay for you to have to absorb the low end as well. I think when you take on more of that low end risk, I don't think the deck is going to be good enough. But I've been wrong plenty of times before, and I guarantee people will be trying for the next couple of weeks to see what happens to Rakdos without it. I mean, there were people who posted in our Discord today even a list that was kind of like that.
I think we're also kind of focusing entirely on Scam when they specifically mention stuff like, it's in the Omnath decks as just really good removal, and it's just the type of thing where I think even mentioning the fact that it's in other random decks is kind of throwaway. Like, they're just like, yeah, it's in some other stuff, a smattering of other decks. But I think it's perhaps Fury's time, or if they really do want to increase the ability of people to play with smaller creatures, widen the format, people to explore additional strategies, that's the kind of card that has to go. And I think, like, Grief is not the one that's keeping additional strategies down. It's just sort of a powerful tool to strip cards out of anyone's deck. But Fury specifically does target the creature-based strategies with low toughness, and so makes sense, I think. If the goal, again, is to give people options, then I think this is a good card to go for. And like I mentioned earlier, I think the theme of all of this is really we want people to have options. We'll see if it's successful or not, but I think it sticks with it provides consistency to their announcement here.
One final note on Grief here. I just, I feel like Grief almost never shows up in a fair context. Like, if you look at it, and the other deck that I want to kind of talk about was Living End, because, we were talking about potentially Grief being the correct ban over Fury. It's like, Grief is not really doing anything fair in the Living End deck either. So I don't know, maybe is Living End a winner from this announcement? I feel like it probably is, because Scam was one of its worst matchups. So
yeah, I think it's a huge winner, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Oh, perhaps you mean fortunately, Dave? I don't know if you misspoke there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we mean unfortunately, because we want to play Rhinos, but
you guys do. I honestly had a little bit. I'm going to tell you guys something right now. Like, this morning, I was really thinking to myself, I wonder if this is going to be the day that they ban Violent Outburst. Finally.
No, oh God, that's why my heart was pounding.
Was it? Because I was joking, seriously...
It's going to be the day.
You guys know that I think Cascade is one of the worst mechanics of the last
it's awful.
15 years.
Geological Appraiser, hello.
Exactly. So bad that we came back to it for some reason. I don't know why, but it's one of my least favorite mechanics of modern, let's call it like the modern format, modern Magic. And I thought maybe they were going to hit all those decks, because it's like, well, okay, if we're going to take something away from Scam, like what are we doing? Like, why aren't we hitting this other thing that's kind of broken? But it's not broken. I know that Rhinos is not a broken deck, and even Living End's not a broken deck. It's just, it's sort of not the way the mechanic was supposed to work, right? And so...
I also hate turning over all the cards until I get to the card I want to cast. That's like my least favorite thing to do. But then when you get to cast it, it feels so good. So I'm there with you, Dave.
Yeah, I
pros and cons, strikes and gutters.
I am a little bummed out by the fact that some decks who could use the help against creature decks to stay interesting do lose Fury. Like, it was in Murktide as like a 1 of occasionally or a 2 of occasionally in the sideboard. It was a reasonable card to be like, yeah, it felt like when we're playing it as a sideboard card, it was pretty cool, but when we found a way to break all the mechanics that were special to the card, then it was like, oh, this card is, you can do 8 damage with this, or you can draw 2 cards when you cast it. Like, that's when it became really absurd. And it had to be taken away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I played an RCQ this weekend. I played no copies of Fury in my Rhinos main deck. I only had 2 in the sideboard, and that's it. So
yeah,
that's something we'll talk about, I think, when we talk about like winners losers, is what happens to rhinos a little bit. Let's talk about cascading some more in Up the Beanstalk. They say one of Modern's newest inclusions, subsidizing many cards in the format that cost 5 or more mana. However, it's rare for a player to pay anywhere close to 5 mana, etc., etc.
Ain't that just a magic?
While removing Fury from the format will certainly impact the usage of Up the Beanstalk, we don't think that's going to be enough. It's really difficult to interact with. The card replaces itself immediately. Players often are just playing a free spell on the same turn because they get a good return on the deal. And they say, I like this line. It is particularly telling when players have concluded that cascading into Up the Beanstalk is more advantageous than the 0 mana options like Crashing Footfalls and Living End. For these reasons, Up the Beanstalk is banned in Modern.
Yeah. This card is just a straight up design mistake, as we've all kind of acknowledged for the last couple of months.
It just seems dumb. Like, I mean, we already have the One Ring. Do we really need Up the Beanstalk for more card advantage in decks like these? I don't know.
If they wanted this to be a theme of going up the Beanstalk, they could have easily had this card not cantrip when it came into play. Then it's totally unplayable. Or they could have put that it only triggers once a turn or something like that. And that might have helped it be a card that was reasonable but not absurd. And this one just was kind of too much.
Are you guys kind of surprised that they chose to ban this card instead of the One Ring? Because I feel like a lot of people who were talking about this, moving, going up to the announcement, had kind of pinpointed the One Ring as the card that was maybe problematic. So, I mean, myself included, I kind of thought they were going to consider banning the ring. Now, you could talk about product announcements and all that stuff, and maybe there's some issues there, but
have you heard about our holiday printing of Lord of the Rings?
Personally, I feel like the ring is more of an issue. But what do you guys think about that?
Here's my thing. Keeping with the theme of diversity and options, I think the One Ring provides more optionality to the format, and I think it has more overt downsides. And people do kill themselves with the One Ring. People do die to the damage. I played against Amulet Titan players who, even after they drew a ton of cards, are losing 6 and they're dying to it. And it's just the kind of stuff that happens. I think it's powerful. I am not denying that. But I think it's powerful in a way that gives us more options. And maybe it eventually becomes too ubiquitous. And we just saw we saw a top 8 with 5 decks just last week that we talked about. 5 of the 8 decks in the top 8 of the Modern Energy had the One Ring. That's not something to sneeze at.
Bless you. Now, David, you make this funny joke about the upcoming holiday set. I want to bring up the fact that during the stream last week, where they essentially told us what they're banning, they explicitly said that they do not look at which products are on the market, on the shelves, when they make their ban decisions. They said this. And yet, I feel like this is further evidence that is just not true.
I think that we're all about to be reminded that the One Ring is a problem, and that this little diversion up the Beanstalk kind of took the gaze away from that for a little bit, because people hate playing against the Omnath decks. They complain about it less in Tron and in Coffers and stuff like that, other decks that run the ring effectively. I think once Omnath picks up the ring again, which I think inevitably it's about to do, we're all going to be reminded of how much we hate that card. And so it's a matter of time. I'm just kind of being cynical when I say that. I also think it's probably true. That's the only card that's worth anything in that set other than Bowmasters. Why else would people buy it other than vibes, I guess? The art is cool. If you like Lord of the Rings, the art's cool. That's fine. But it's super expensive. I saw one of those packs at Target over the weekend, and it's $50 at Target for a holiday edition.
Oh, the holiday release?
Booster.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Jesus.
I picked it up for a minute. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that.
But it could have had a ring in it. You never know.
Yeah, exactly.
You can buy anything. You can buy 2 Smugglers Copters with that $50.
Exactly. But I got 8. What do I need 2 for?
Overall, I'm more than happy this card's gone. Like you said, Dave, it just it was not designed for Modern, especially with the Modern that we live in now, with all the expensive cards that are actually cheap type thing. So.
Yeah. So, we're talking about the relationship between Beanstalk and Fury. I think it's worth noting the relationship between Fury and Omnath as well. I think the Omnath decks also lose a very important and powerful card. And though the pairing of Ren and 6, Omnath, into Fairy, in my opinion, to like kind of 2, 3, 4. It will still probably exist in some cases because Solitude still exists, and that's really, really good. I actually think that like banning Fury does truly take that deck down a peg, almost as much as banning Beanstalk does.
We'll see.
Oh, yeah.
I'm pretty sure there were some 4-color lists from the PT, or maybe like right before the PT, because that's when Lord of the Rings came out, that were, and maybe even like a couple weeks after the PT, that were playing, 4 copies of Ring. This was before Beanstalk, and I'm pretty sure there were lists that didn't have Fury before. They were kind of just all in on like Solitude, maybe a main deck Endurance, and then like the 4 Ren and 6 4 Teferi, 4 Omnath, that kind of stuff, 4 Binding, of course. So maybe they'll go back to like that kind of package with, Ring and just overloading on a bunch of stuff like that. But yeah, there definitely is like, in a certain metagame, Fury like you would want a main deck Fury in certain metagames, like in a Yawgmoth metagame, which maybe we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, I think that the 4-color decks will still be very, very good.
Shall we talk winners, losers? Anybody have anything else to say about Up the Beanstalk?
No.
Good riddance.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
So let's talk losers first, just for kicks.
Scam?
I want to talk about Scam. So here's the deal with Scam, right? Scam's taking, obviously we talked a lot about Scam taking a hit. We don't really know what happens to this deck. There's options, right? Like you said, Dave, is like, I think you're always looking for some opportunity to play like Rakdos midrange for some reason.
Dave used the J word.
Which one?
Jund.
Oh, Jund. I was like, wow, what did I say?
Jerk.
Yeah. I just love Ragavan, so that's where I'm at, and I don't want to play Murktide. So
Tarmogoyfs?
I like Tarmogoyf. Okay.
So we'll see what happens with Scam. Obviously, it's taking a hit. We talked about why. The Omnath Beans decks, losing Beanstalk and Fury, like Stan said, that's huge. Like, what's weird, this is one of those decks that statistically was not particularly overpowered. WotC took action anyway. It's probably, one of those things where we have to keep worrying about every kind of card that we print. It's a threat maybe if Scam is going out of the picture.
I think they really did it because they can't keep the kids from playing bigger than 60 card mains. Come on. You don't have Yorion anymore. You can't play more than 60 cards.
You're not allowed.
Yeah, people are just playing like 65 and 67 cards. Like that's the real problems.
They're pre-boarding its mill.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that what they tell themselves?
I don't know what is going to replace Fury. We know what's going to replace Beanstalk in those decks. It's going to be the One Ring. I don't know what's going to replace Fury in those decks. It'll be something annoying, but we'll see.
So those are the obvious ones. I don't think we have anything more to say about those, really. But I think there are other potential losers, and this is what I got to before we had to get on microphone. I think one is Scales.
I actually totally think Scales is a loser as well.
I agree.
I think.
What's weird, though, is if you look at Scales' matchup spread, it's actually pretty good against a lot of stuff, but the sample size is not as much as we have for every other deck, really, every other popular deck. So it loses the good matchups. It loses Scam, it loses Beans. It has some other good ones, but losing decks with that much popularity that you have a strong matchup against is not good for you. I don't have much else to say about that.
Yeah. That was the next one on my list, though. Stan, any other losers you think?
Yes, we got to talk about Rhinos here, I think, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know. Rhinos is a tricky one. It's been cutting down on Furies,
but not just from Fury. I think it has. So Rhinos has slightly better than average matchups against Scam and Omnath. And so it's losing those two okay matchups. But
right.
I think the metagame is big. There's going to be rising threats, like we just talked about Living End, a matchup I do not want to face. What's stuff like, I don't remember, I don't have the MTG meta grid, I'm going to pull it up, but like what other kind of things do we think are going to be winners here that could impact Rhino's effectiveness?
So I think Yogg is a big open question. I think Yogg won big in this announcement. Fury was a huge problem for that card, and Beanstalk decks were a problem for Yogg. So if those two are on the downswing, I think Yogg only has room to grow from this position. But the relationship between Yogg and Rhinos was always a difficult one for the Yogg decks. And that's remained mostly true in this like post-Fury metagame when Rhinos became more of a flashy blue deck. And I think it's going to be interesting to see whether that remains to be the case. Like whether Subtlety and Tidebinder are enough to kind of like keep Yogg on the back foot.
Before we get into more details, I do think one thing that's really interesting that I wanted to mention is that Scam had a lot of strong matchups across the board. There were some weaker ones, of course, right? And then Four Color Midrange had fewer great matchups. In fact, it was a sub 50% deck. But they sort of covered the metagame between the two of them. There were a few decks that, like Hardened Scales, like I said, were both in the red for those decks. But between the two of them, they were taking care of the majority of the metagame. Besides like Rhinos and Scales, like I mentioned, this is effectively a reset of the metagame. And I don't think that we're going to have a great prediction of like what rises from this, but I am really curious to see what happens. And I'm particularly curious what you all think about, like, you know, what would I start tinkering with, or what would I want to take to my next event, with those two probably being much less prevalent, if not, you know, completely eliminated in the case of Scam doing what it does in the same way.
Yeah, we were talking about the, you know, kind of the matchup with Yawgmoth versus Rhinos. I'm very, very curious to see if the loss of Fury kind of shifts the dynamic of that matchup, because it's kind of weird, and I found this a lot ever since the introduction of the Agatha Soul Cauldron. I actually kind of found that the matchup was a little tougher than it was before, and I don't know if that was a shift, if it was only a shift because a lot of people were moving away from main deck Fury and Rhinos, or if it also had to do with the addition of Cauldron, because typically, like, you have to kill their Grist on site, but when you did, they would just Cauldron it, and then it's really hard to beat, like, multiple Grist. So that's definitely something that I want to keep an eye on.
Like, I'm just looking at Scam, right? Like, in just talking about popular decks that Scam was really good against a lot of stuff, right? Like Omnath, Titan, Burn, Dimir Control, Domain Zoo, Tron, Mill. I mean, you get the idea here, right? Like, and then like Beans was covering Creativity, Hammer, Murktide. All of these things are going to get some kind of soft bump because of this potentially, and impact the rest of the meta. And there's some stuff that was sort of just cruising in the middle, like Yogg, like Rhinos, potentially things like, you know, Living End now doesn't have to maybe worry about the, you know, casual Dothi Voidwalker or something like that. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm just sort of vamping here. Like, I don't have a great idea where I see things going.
I mean, I will say I kind of think Hammer's going to have a resurgence based on Fury just going away overall, and like you said, maybe Beanstalk having a little bit less access to easiest card draw, and having to go to the ring instead will help. But I think Hammer was already a little bit on an upswing, and I think it has a chance to go even higher as a result of this. I also wonder if we're just going to have one of those metagames for a minute where suddenly Titan is the second or third best deck for a little bit again, where it's going to be like, you know, Rhinos, Yawgmoth, and Titan are going to move up, and then everything else is going to be kind of below it. But
interesting you mentioned Hammer there, because I was actually of the impression that Hammer had a good matchup against Scam. Would you guys say that's correct?
So interestingly, Devin, Rakdos Scam would lose to Hammer Time. It was a 42.7% deck against Hammer, but Four Color Midrange was strong against it at 58%. So between the two of them, you know, Hammer Time is kind of floating in the middle there. So I'm surprised to see that. Maybe just because like the number of creatures Hammer could do, or like spitting out all of the Urza Saga tokens on that game plan or something like that.
Yeah, Sanctifier in the post-board games was a big thing too. And like, if you ever just go Giver into Stoneforge and your opponent has a Fury, they can't kill both things, right? If they don't kill the Giver on one, then you just get to protect the Stoneforge. So it's like there are some really awkward lines up against Furies, or, you know, Hammer against Fury. And also, I think the Living End matchup is pretty bad for Hammer. That's not typically a matchup you want to see from the Hammer side of things. As far as losers, this might be kind of a weird, kind of out there hot take, but I actually think Coffers is kind of a big loser here.
Oh no.
Because like Scam and Beans were two of probably its better matchups. At least, you know, I've played a lot of the Coffers deck, and those have kind of been typically like matchups that I do want to face. And Yawgmoth and Rhinos have been matchups I definitely do not want to face. And
Titan's quite bad statistically.
Titan too. So yeah, those matchups are kind of tough from the Coffer side of things. So yeah, even though it's like they didn't ban anything from Coffers directly, it's just like the metagame I think is going to shift in such a way that probably is a little hostile towards Coffers.
You know, I've been looking at this grid of data for a couple hours now, right? And what I like about it is I think they targeted the right stuff. Like, not only
it was awkward that while we sat here while you looked at that
that
grid.
was, you know, just tapping your watches.
The last couple hours. It's almost dawn in the UK right now. Tanner cut it all out, but
Yeah, it was just crickets. But yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting is like, when you lose the consistency of especially scam, is that stuff becomes a normal metagame again, right? Which is just like risers, fallers, metagame forces that are supposed to happen.
Yeah, that even I've been thinking, like, in a weird way, does having fewer turn one grief scams potentially happening now actually just kind of like make everything a little better and thusly make nothing better? And just like keep things more even. Like, I wonder if more decks kind of move toward the 50% rage.
Yeah, I think the only thing is probably maybe like the creature focused strategies, or maybe overall a little stronger because specifically Fury. So maybe that does help something like Yawgmoth. But then if that happens, then people can play more Rhinos or something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, we still have subtleties. We still have Brotherhood's Ends. We still have Unholy Heats and Lightning Bolts and Fatal Pushes. Like... And we have Orcish Bowmasters. You know what I mean? Like,
yep. I like all these cards.
I don't see Llanowar Elves like suddenly flooding the metagame, and I don't know that we're gonna like look at wider boards moving forward outside of the decks that already kind of do that now, such as Yawgmoth and Scales and Living End.
Wait, so Stan, you're telling me that Humans is not going to be the best deck in Modern? How could you?
Devin, are you sitting down?
I don't need. I can maybe not be.
Yeah, you're gonna want to stand up for this one. Yeah, I don't know that Humans is making the comeback, but maybe. I don't know.
I mean, I do think it's interesting though that Shane is kind of saying this is a metagame reset, and Stan is kind of saying, yeah, that reset might be everything returning to the mean, to the middle sum. I don't know.
I mean,
let's see.
There's no new decks, right? The reset is just people are going to play the decks that they were playing before, with the exception of the scam players. And then, that's just going to be like it's weird. It's not really a reset. It's more of just like removing one deck and then everything else just playing against each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, what I was really getting at is just like it's putting it back to a normal metagame, which is there's not one thing that can oppress as many things as Scam could, and so we play Magic like Garfield intended, right? Which is just like I don't know if he ever intended this to be the case, but the metagame can suss itself out in different ways, and again give people the options to play decks that maybe have particularly good matchups, and you're not going to walk into a tournament and have 20%, hopefully not have 20% of the run be like, look, I could kind of try to consider the overall metagame, and there's going to be this much Murktide, or Rhinos is making a comeback lately, or maybe got to think about Living End. I can just bring Scam and care about nothing.
Mm-hmm. Does Burn get better here?
Does it go from like 37% to 38%? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
It maybe. It was particularly bad against Scam, and it was not great against 4-color midrange somehow. So, or against like the Omnath deck. So,
does it have good matchups? Like I just
it's good against Green Tron. It's good against Mill.
Classic.
Oh, it's good against Rhinos. Like 70%.
Yeah. It is good against Rhinos.
So there, Classic. Maybe it does.
One last thing I want to mention on Fury. This is the first card banned out of MH2. First and only.
True.
Oh, an otherwise successful set.
I mean, that took a while when you think about it that way, because they had to ban stuff out of MH1 pretty fast, if you guys remember. I don't know if you remember, but yeah.
Luris.
Probably a little too long, though.
You say they waited too long?
Probably. I think so.
Probably. I mean, it has been 3.5 years, or 3.5-ish years since MH2 came out, right? That was 2019? Oh, no, that was 2020.
2020,
so
I think.
It's been 2.5 years, yeah.
Yeah, sounds about right.
So where are we going from here, y'all?
I'm going back to bed.
Do we feel happy? Are people happy? You guys happy?
I'm happy enough. Like, I mean, I like the option of Fury, but
every time I call Shane on the phone, Shane, are you happy? I'm happy enough.
I'm happy enough. Say, Dave, things are fine. I mean, I would prefer that a format can self-regulate, and I think we're seeing the inability of the format to self-regulate. That's why we talked, I specifically even mentioned that like a few months ago, right? When there was no changes. And it was like, well, they just want to give people the opportunity to see if they can regulate the format themselves. Clearly Scales was not enough. and it'll never be enough because it's an artifact-based creature deck, right? And there's not a lot of...
Taking a shot at scale, another shot at scales for no reason.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense that they did what they needed to do, and I'm glad to see Modern hopefully return to something that is more dynamic and gives people the opportunity to play a little bit more what they want. That's my
I'm
take.
still going to cast Crashing Footfalls, whether it's good or not, but...
Yes, my man.
I mean, look, between all of this, of course, I was the only person on this podcast who liked to play Rakdos. No, I guess Shane did too. Towards the end, you picked it up.
Oh, yeah, it's fun.
I'm sad to have another one of my decks that I never thought would be the quote-unquote best deck in the format rise to become the best deck in the format and get banned. But it is what it is. Clearly, it was a nuisance, so I'm sorry. I'm sorry I was a part of this. That's what I want to say to the listeners.
You need to get at us before you start playing your next deck so we can invest before,
Yes, I want to divest, yes.
Yeah. You're going to short Furies. I'm more excited about Smuggler's Copter being unbanned than anything, to be honest. So it's kind of like that vibe is making me happy enough with the whole announcement overall that I'm just going to concentrate on that and go forward.
I still can't believe they did that. My jaw dropped when I saw it. I was like, what?
I mean, it really felt on Twitter like people had reached a consensus that it was going to happen. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like people were almost talking about it like it was a foregone conclusion. And I was kind of like, oh, this is what we think now. Okay. I guess that'll be cool if that happens. And then here it is.
Yeah. Wild.
Yeah, truly wild.
I'm going to cast that card a lot over the next week and a half before Atlanta.
Devin, what are you liking for Atlanta amid the bans?
Well, I was planning on playing. I was thinking about, after the announcement today, I was thinking about Boros Convoke, which I haven't got the chance to try it with Copter yet, but I played a little bit of Gruul, I played a little Soul Artifact, played a little Greasefang, and played a really bad Hollow 1 deck that I thought was going to get better with Copter, but apparently it didn't. Most impressive deck today was Gruul so far, but I want to try Convoke too, and then I also want to try a little bit more Greasefang.
How's Inti looking to you right now?
It's a good card, but it's a 2-mana 2/2. And 2-mana 2/2s in a Bone Crusher Giant format are not great.
Sad to hear.
But the other thing is maybe Copter makes Bone Crusher a little worse because it's a 3/3, so I have to see how that plays out.
Well, my friends, I think we're at a good stopping point. I think we talked as much about this as we can. If this is the way we keep moving forward with the type of announcements we get, I imagine we won't get as many words if they're not banning 4 cards. But I'm all for it. Thanks, Watsy, for thinking about re-looking at Pioneer, I suppose, and giving us some more tools to play with there. So you will watch the space, hopefully, for future happenings in Modern and Pioneer, and we will be here to tell them about you on future episodes of your hopefully favorite podcast, at least in Modern, or at least in Magic, The Dive Down.
At least 2,000 of you.
Yes, at least 2,000
on Spotify.
On Spotify. Yeah. But that wraps up this week's show. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the podcast. You get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. If you use Apple Podcasts or you're on Spotify, feel free to leave us a rating or a review or give us some comments in the podcast feedback. If you want to submit a question to us or reach out to us, say hey, you can tweet at us at The Dive Down or email thedivedown@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, you can join the Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown. And you can check out the store, get some swag at thedivedown.com/store. Of course, head on over to Heavy Play. Get some of those incredible deck and dice boxes and playmats featuring the EquipMag system. You can use code TheDiveDown2023 for 10% off your first order there. Shout out to Mana Traders for sponsoring the Dive Down. You can use the promo code TheDiveDown23, all one word, for 10% off your first 2 months of renting Magic Online cards there. And get some amazing shaving soaps, body soaps, fragrances, and more at Barrister and Mann using code TheDiveDown23, all spelled out, for 15% off your first order. As always, special thanks to the bands Nova and Splace Blood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there and get to the chopper!